Minitam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutare Sayam Rupa Karamayam Dharati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Sri Rupam Sagaditam
Vandeham Sri Guru
Sadhanam
Siyata Parakane Shayam Rupa Karamayam Dharati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakane Shayam Rupa Karamayam Dharati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata.
Okay, there we go. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pango Mama Madhya Matera Gata Matsavasha Parambojara Adharamada Mohanum Sriman Rasaram Vivam Sivana Karsan Veneshan Novaka Gopinata Sri Sarhan Dibyad Bindrani Kapadrumada Srimad Ratnagara Shima Sanishtam Shri Shri Radhashila Govinda Prasadavi Seva Manushmanami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanitaya Chajagaritaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaham Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Dadvija Mangalam Panari Kaksho Mangalaya Tano Hari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasadevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Vidmahi Vishnu Padnicha Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Sri Sri Hari Priya Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Dharatade Tapti Kanchana Goringi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanusute Devi Pranamani Hari Priya Shubham Karoti Kalyaram Ragam Dana Sambaram Satipuri Vanashana Dupa Jyoti Namoshate Dupa Jyoti Janardanam Dupa Jyoti Paramaram Deepa Metaruparam Deepa Jyoti Namoshate Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chevanaruttamam Devam Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayodya Nashtapriyashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Shoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Nigamakabhagaritam Param Shukamakadamita Drapi Samitam Pivata Bhagatam Rashtamarayam Mahora Horashika Bhagavakam Krishna Sadam Bhagate Dharmagini Karonashta Dishamasha Paranako Dunodi Daham Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishnaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunibadi Praskita Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. I'm not sure I'm on Facebook. I've got a window here, but it doesn't have the little tab that shows how many online viewers there are, and there's nobody in the comment section. Sometimes Zoom opens with another version of Zoom, and others find it's impossible to jump on board. But I don't know anything else other than just launch into our topic. We've got Rob here in any case, and we can post this live on Facebook afterwards, but it's curious because usually Brett and John and Malik and everybody are on board by now, but we see nothing happening over here on the Facebook side. So I may just be talking to the wall for the next 45 minutes. What to do? What indeed to do? Okay. All right, I'm gonna start the Facebook over again. Sorry for the delay, but I just think I need to go back on Facebook again and have another run at it. Is it on Facebook? Am I on Facebook? Am I on Facebook? Okay, bye says I'm okay. Okay, bye says I'm not seeing anything on Facebook. I'm not seeing any viewers. I'm not seeing it. But bye says it's working. Okay. I just see a blank screen, but my Bobby came in and she says everything's okay. So take her word for it. I've been taking her word for things for the last 53 years. No reason not to do it now. Okay. Our title today is You Cannot Change the Past. If you want to get the attention of the Lord, take what life throws at you. And when I was in grade school, It was a cold winter day. Nobody wanted to go outside for the sports period. Mr. Partenheimer, who was the sports coach for everybody, he'd have us play dodgeball in the gym. And you have, divide up and throw balls. And the whole idea was to dodge the balls. And they were coming at you from all different angles. And it's an impossibility to dodge all the balls. You have so many people throwing balls from so many different angles. The best you can do is just dodge most of them. And that's what we do. We push ourselves in order to maximize pleasure, maximize desirable results, and minimize undesirable results. But in spite of your best efforts, and no matter how nimble or athletic you are, you're going to get hit by the balls of life. So if you want to get the attention of the Lord, don't rant and rail, talk about how unfair it was. Just roll with it and try to see that the balls of life, the fact that you're jostled out of your comfort zone once in a while, that you don't get what you want, you don't get it in the time frame that you wanted, or it's not happening as quickly as you thought it was happening. Just take all these as not happening to you, but happening for you, for the development of your character. So you'll develop patience, so you'll develop endurance, and your character will come up higher. Over and over and over again in the Bhagavatam, we see this common thread amongst those who are successful in the path of devotional service. They roll with their circumstances. They see the good. They don't try to find out what's wrong with this certain circumstance, but they try to see what I can learn. What's Krishna trying to teach me in these circumstances? Yesterday, Lakshmi Nrsimha, who was on board with us, asked a couple of really good questions. The first one had to do with pets. We talked about how through virtually no fault of his own, Bharat Maharaj, who was a great devotee, came and left everything to go to the forest to make up the last 1% of Krishna consciousness that he lacked and go back home, back to Godhead. Didn't make it in that lifetime. In fact, it took him 2 more lifetimes before he went back to home, back to Godhead. His stumbling block was a little deer that had become attached to him and vice versa. And it was an unfortunate circumstance. Looking back in retrospect, analyzing it, being a Monday morning quarterback really doesn't really change anything in this case. No matter how you look at it, how you analyze it, could have, should have, would have, it still comes out the same way. He couldn't let that little fawn drown in the water. He is a compassionate devotee of the Lord. He saved its life. Inevitably, the fawn imprinted and bothered his meditation. From there on, he could hardly chant without the little fawn sitting nearby him, getting his attention, rubbing his arm with its soft, velvety nose. You couldn't really imagine any other outcome. And so Lakshmi Nrsimha asked, what about pets? Should we be heartless? Should we be indifferent towards our pets? Now, let me just make a statement here. We're talking about people like Ambarish. He got a fiery weapon thrown at him, and he didn't lift a finger to defend himself. This is an extraordinary state of mind. It is a state of mind of someone who is on the highest level of human perfection. Don't try to imitate the great souls. Just learn from their example. When Ambarish stands without lifting a finger in his own defense and with folded hands awaits the fiery weapon to kill him, being perfectly calm and full of equanimity, we can't do that. We can't do that. Lakshmi asked, if someone comes up and attacks us on the street, are we supposed to make like Ambarish Maharaj and not defend ourselves? No. You act according to the development of your consciousness. However much progress you made, however much advancement you have, you act according to the level of your realization. Don't artificially try to be something that you're not. If we're attacked, we have to take every reasonable step to defend ourselves and especially to defend our families. that's consonant with the level of our realization. When someone like Ambarish doesn't defend himself, he's really not bothered by the demon. He's not bothered by the animosity of Durvasa Muni. He's not even bothered by the prospect of losing his body. Dhirasthitana moyate, komara macharam nabyan. Dhirasthitana moyate, dehino shminyata dehi komaram yanutata dehantaram. Dhirasthitana moyate. Right in the beginning, Krishna tells us, without wasting any time, early on in the second chapter. First chapter is just historical context. The second chapter is where the philosophy of the Gita starts. And what is it? Verse 11, verse 12. Krishna gets right into it. And he says, those who are sober, those who are perfect in their devotional path, are not disturbed by the change of body called death. If someone comes up to me sometime today and rips the shirt off my back, it'll be a little bump in my day. It'll create a slight disturbance in my consciousness, but it's not going to destroy my day because I know I'm not the shirt. Shirt is not me. You can do whatever you want to my shirt and not even wreck my day if I'm on that high level of realization. There's a verse in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. It doesn't really apply to this point, but directly, but indirectly, I think it gives us an indicator. It says, Brajam tishtam tadaikan yataipakan yatachina jara dehi karmajere janam. Kamsa has just lost it. He's driving the chariot of his sister, Devaki, who just got married. Imagine, it's her married day, happiest day of her life. She married another king, a noble personality, Vasudev. After the wedding ceremony, Kamsa, the brother-in-law, is driving her to her new home, to her husband's home. To make the transition easier, generally speaking, weddings would occur in the bride's home, where she lived all her life under the protection of her brothers and her father. That's where the wedding would take place traditionally. After the wedding, she would go to her husband's home. Now, she hardly knew this fellow. The marriages were mostly arranged in the past. So here's a stranger that she's never met before, and she's going from the home in which she's lived in her whole life today to this stranger's house. Therefore, to make the transition easier, she was allowed, especially in the royal caste, she was allowed to bring some of her girlfriends, some of her maids and domestics that she'd known her whole life. They would come with her. And also a male who she was very attached to would also drive the chariot and accompany them. So it would be less of a contrast between this household and this household. And the maids were allowed to stay with her on a permanent basis in her new home. So all of that made it doable. Now, as Kamsa was driving his sister to her new home, a voice came out of the sky and said, Kamsa, you fool, you're driving the chariot of your sister, not knowing that her eighth son will kill you. Kamsa is a poster boy for bodily consciousness. He thinks he's his body. Obviously, he's worked out, he's strong, he's athletic, he's invested a lot in this body, and he's not so dispassionate about losing it as devotees are. Just the opposite. The body is all he knows. He thinks he is this body. And he flips. He totally loses it. Imagine the shame, the humiliation. He draws his sword right in public. There's obviously a huge crowd. They're in an upbeat mood. And after this voice from the sky, he grabs her sister by the hair. He draws his sword. He's going to kill her right in public, his own sister. I mean, he demeans himself so thoroughly. Vasudev's quick thinking, quick talking, tells him, your sister is not a threat. It's the eighth child. It's going to be at least 8 to 10 years. You don't have to do anything now. And I promise you, I will bring you every child, not only the eighth child, but I'll bring you every child, and you can decide. Vasudev was famous for keeping his word. Vasudev was of such character that he would never break his word. So this mollified Kamsa, and then he sort of snapped to, he sort of snapped out of his trance, and he looked around and he thought, "Oh my God, have I embarrassed myself or what?" And everybody's looking at Kamsa, everybody's giving Kamsa this funny look like, man, this guy is way out there. I mean, everybody's attached to their body, but to kill your sister on her wedding day, that's like really way out there. People, their mouths were in O's in amazement, their eyes are wide. Kamsa, he felt weird, the way people were looking at him. And Vasudev is playing the diplomat. Vasudev is greasing the wheels. Vasudev is, he's treading, he's like a duck, seems very calm above the surface of the water. But if you could see his little feet under the water, they're just like going like 60 miles an hour. So Vasudev is trying to keep it together. He's trying to save his wife's life. He's trying to mollify Kamsa. So he has to appear very calm and unruffled on the surface, but you can imagine his brain's going 90 miles an hour. And so what he says to Kamsa here in the 10th canto, Vrajams teachtam charai yatayavagana yatachana jalakavam jamhibdaram. He says, he gives the example of a caterpillar transferring from one leaf to another. The caterpillar, there's a leaf here and there's a leaf here and there's space with presumably a drop. So the caterpillar stretches out and it places its footing on the leaf to which it wants to transfer. It gets the footing all firmly situated, gets a good grip, and only after it has a good grip on the leaf to which it wants to go, only then does it give up its grip on the leaf from which it is going. You don't give up the grip where you are until you have transferred the grip to where you're going. Otherwise, you fall. And so this is the example that Vasudev gives to Kamsa. He says, nobody can act beyond the level of their realization. Nobody can do that. You can only act like a saint when you are a saint. When you factually speaking are unperturbed by all circumstances and do not have any unnatural attachment to the body. If that's your state of consciousness, if that's where you live, then yeah, you could take this dodgeball. This dodgeball could hit you, and it wouldn't affect you. You take it as the mercy of the Lord, something to learn from this. Obviously, you're not at that level. You just acted according to your nature. Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, everybody acts according to their nature. You can't be more than what you are. The one thing that Krishna doesn't like, Paritanaya sadhan vinasya. One thing he likes is real. Sometimes people say, get real. Be who you are. Don't put up a pretense. Don't fake it. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Just be who you are. What you see is what you get. You don't have to be perfect. Lord knows. Many devotees of Krishna are not perfect. We read in the Krishna book about Caru. Caru was involved in a conspiracy to steal the, what was it? The created gold from his father-in-law. Yeah, he was engaged in a conspiracy to kill his father-in-law even. And Caru is such a great devotee that he was the one chosen to carry Krishna from Vrindavan to Mathura. And he had some wonder. He gave some beautiful prayers on the journey. Bhima had a terrible temper. Bhima had an anger management problem. He was always flying off the handle. He lived on a very physical platform. He was full of strength. Imagine some guy in the gym that's got muscles coming out of his earlobes. When you've invested that much in your physical strength and your musculature, you have to use it. It starts taking on a life of its own. It starts controlling your life. Um, it, it's like a dictator over you. Find if you go to extraordinary lengths to build strength and muscle, then there's a pattern of behavior which you cannot avoid because you're in a certain state of consciousness. So whatever you are, Krishna doesn't insist that every devotee uh, follow a pattern, uh, follow a mold. He likes variety. He's the Lord of variety. Advaitam achutam anantam anantarupam. He himself, although one, appears in limitless forms. He appears in so many ways amongst the human society. He appears amongst the demigods. He appears as a lion. He appears as a tortoise. He appears as a boar. Krishna himself, although one, you can see he's keenly into varieties. He appears unlimitedly in all different species and forms, according to particular places and circumstances, particular audiences. Krishna loves variety. And so Krishna doesn't ask for perfection, but he does insist on transparency. Don't pretend. Don't try to be something that you're not. I saw a post once the other day. I think I used it for one of my slideshows that's coming up. It said, "My wish for you is that you be as happy in your life as you pretend to be on Facebook." So, Vasudeva is basically saying the same thing to Kamsa. Don't pretend. You're attached, and being attached based on where you are at this time of life, you don't really have a lot of options. You haven't gotten spiritual realization either due to your own bad history in previous lives, or your own stubbornness, or your own willfulness, or maybe you haven't met the right personality. Whatever, it hasn't happened in you, and so there's no point in you trying to emulate saintly people. You did what the modes of material nature who have bound you have dictated you to do. So don't worry about it. So in answer to Lakshmi's question, if someone attacks you and you're attached to the body, as we still are, even those of us who are practicing devotional service, we should defend ourselves because we are on the path, and the likelihood is that the person who's attacking us is not on the path. And so from that perspective, we are doing more with our lives, and we have more of a potential to positively affect other people's lives than the attacker. And so you have a duty to defend yourself and to prolong your life. Sanatan Goswami was down on himself at one point, as described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was going to commit suicide, and Lord Chaitanya Maharaj said, "You can't. Your body belongs to me. You cannot kill your body because it doesn't belong to you. You're killing my body, and I will not allow that." If you're initiated and engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, then you don't have the right to act non-violently in the face of violent aggression. You have the duty, you have the obligation to defend yourself. Devotees are never aggressors because they don't covet others' possession. They're not greedy. They accept whatever Krishna sends them for their maintenance and don't waste time trying to get more. And so we don't pursue or exhibit aggression. But devotees have a duty to defend themselves. They have a duty to defend themselves. However, in spite of your best efforts to ward off trouble, there will be reverses in life. Life is about loss. Everything that you have, you're going to lose it. Your own body. Naya chat bashasham basha. Nakashid Kadicha Datapi Rajan Kimnu Janma Karma Vish. This is another valuable piece of advice that Vasudev gives to Kamsa. He says, you know, you're so attached to your wife and your children and your palace and your position and all like these things, and you're trying to act in such a way as to perpetuate that. You know, obviously, Vasudev says to Kamsa, you like where you are, you like who you are, you like the perks of being a king, you like the power, you like the influence, you like all of these things, and you're committing crimes in order to perpetuate the situation which you're in, to eliminate your enemies, to reduce threats, and so on and so forth. But consider that you can't even hold on to your own body. Your body, in due course of time, will be taken away from you, despite all of your efforts to preserve it, to hang on to it. Your body doesn't belong to you. Same lesson that Lord Chaitanya was teaching to Sanatana Goswami. Lord Chaitanya was saying, your body belongs to me. You're engaged in preaching and practicing devotional service. So you are the property of my internal potency. Kamsa, on the other hand, is sold out to Krishna's external potency. He only knows the body. So he is, you might say, the property of Krishna's external potency. And Vasudev says that you have to use your body in such a way, you don't have the power. So when something comes against you in this material world and you experience a reversal, in spite of your best efforts, in spite of your best exertion to preserve your body and to preserve your family and friends and country, bottom line is you can't. From the moment we're born, we die. And so life is about loss. Everything that we have, we're going to lose. What to speak of wealth, what to speak of residences, what to speak of wives, what to speak of children, what to speak of grandchildren. We're going to lose our own particular body. And we need to come to terms with the fact that life is about loss. And we can't live in the past. Everyone, as they look back, and the older you are, the more that you can, as you look back, see that you've lost. My mother called me from they call it a rest home, where she was spent the last 2 years of her life in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. She says, she wailed. I picked up the phone. She's, Chris, Chris, Chris. She just wailed over the phone to me. I spent most of my life accumulating things, and now in the last few years, I've lost everything. My husband died. My other son died. I had to give up the house in order to pay for the care in the long-term facility. She had a stroke, so she lost the use of the left side of her body. Just one loss after another. We have to live with loss. We can't rant and rave against loss. Loss is a part of life. If you become bitter and resentful because of something you've lost, because of some unfair situation, some betrayal, you'll never attract the mercy of Krishna. Tamahamdi Santaham Samsadashu, you will end up descending into the even lower, darker modes of material nature. I remember in Australia, we were at one program, it's called the Wayside Chapel in Potts Point, and people were able to get up and rant. And this one fellow, Black Power was very popular, both in America and Australia. And he was an Aborigine, and they lived in this area called Redfern. Redfern was a kind of, I guess what you would have called in those days is a kind of a ghetto where most of the people of color lived. And he got up on stage and he started talking about the injustice and the unfairness and the civil rights and everything. And we were just sitting in the audience in dhotis with tilak and shaven heads and everything. And completely unprovoked, just out of nowhere, he turns to us and he says, if you, Hare Krishnas, ever come into Redford, I'll kill you. Well, I was thinking, Well, up to now, he was just venting. Um, he had, a lot of reasons to be bitter. They've been discriminated against. He had been held back. His opportunities have been curtailed because of his color. And these are all, historically speaking, these are all true. These are all valid points. But when he said that, when he just lashed out at the Hare Krishnas, who have nothing to do with his repression, in fact, we're not only trying to liberate him from the limitations that society imposes upon him because of his birth and his colors, we're trying to liberate him from birth, death, disease, and old age altogether. So there's no greater well-wishing friend than the devotees. We're trying to solve all of the problems, not just some of the problems. We're trying to get a permanent solution, not just put a Band-Aid on it. And I thought, okay, well and good. You're engaged in politics, you're engaged in Black power, you're engaged in civil rights, but now you've crossed the line. Now your bitterness, your resentfulness, and your ignorance has driven you to offend devotees of the Lord. And I could just see him. I could just see, because of having offended the devotees, I could just see that his next birth, if you think this birth is bad, my man, if you think this is bad, if you think you have so much to complain about in this birth, you feel there's been so much injustice, now you've offended devotees without any reason whatsoever, just wait to your next birth. You'll really, really have things to complain about. You think that in your apartment in Redfern, you don't have an up-to-date modern heating system. If you lived in a different suburb in Sydney and you had a nicer apartment, a more expensive apartment with a more up-to-date heating system, that your temperature in your apartment would be 72, whereas the best you can do in your rundown apartment is 65. Well, good luck, because next life, you might just be a llama right out there. Right now, it's 15 degrees outside, and you might be a llama. Well, good luck then. You can complain all you want. So don't get affected when the balls of life hit you. Recognize that you came here, so you did the crime, you have to do the time. Now, in this connection, if I can find it, I did a little research. It's interesting because there's still no activity on Facebook that I can see. I'm not seeing Brent. I'm not seeing Natasha. I'm not seeing anybody, but at least I'm glad that you guys are seeing me. So, okay, here are some examples throughout history of people who were displaced. They had to leave their native country, their family, their friends. They had to start all over. And they did it. They bounced back from that situation. We have all this rhetoric about the Palestinians being deprived of their homeland in 1948 or whatever, Balfour Declaration, and so on and so forth. But there are so many people, the Jewish people themselves have been kicked out of every Middle Eastern country. They've gone back to their ancient homeland, which is called Israel in texts that are thousands and thousands of years old. They've gotten over it. They've lost in the concentration camps in Germany. But look where they are now. They have a state which has the fourth most powerful economy in the world. Sometimes people laugh that if the anti-Israel protesters want to boycott everything to do with Israel, they wouldn't have a blender. They wouldn't have many of the features of their car. They wouldn't have GPS. They wouldn't have life-saving surgeries. They wouldn't have medicines. There's no, for per capita, there's no more technical medicinal improvements that come from anywhere on the level of Israel. So they got over it. They got over it. If you go back in history to the early 1800s, much of what we know now as California and Arizona, New Mexico, was owned by Mexico. It was owned by Mexico. But you don't find the Mexicans marching to get Phoenix back, to from Portland to the Rio Grande, you don't find them. They got over it. And frankly, we're not going to give Phoenix back. We're not going to give Dallas back. We're not going to give Houston back. It is what it is. It may be fair, it may not be fair, but it is what it is. And so you really have only one option. Roll with the loss, absorb the loss, and move on. And here are a few people that did it. The first one is Albert Einstein. The preface to this little piece, which I found as a CNN editorial. They are destitute, desperate, but determined. Thousands of them flee their homes every year, risking their lives in unseaworthy boats or crammed in trucks. Refugees struggling to find a new life some of them have seized the world's attention. In some places, they have faced a backlash. Imagine you're coming as a refugee to another country, and there's always the anti-immigration groups who want to stop you, who want to deny you, who claim you're a drain, that you're going to take jobs which would otherwise go to natives. But history is full of examples of refugees who went on to leave lasting contributions in the realms of science, arts, politics, and sports. First, Marlene Dietrich, the famous Phil star. She says, America took me into her bosom when there was no other country worth the name. But in my heart, I am a German in my soul. She fled Hitler's regime. She was Jewish, I think, because of that. Here is Freddie Mercury. Not sure. He was from the rock group Queens. He said, if I lost everything tomorrow, I'd claw my way back to the top somehow or other. He was born in Zanzibar, and the family fled a bloody revolution that shook the island in 1964 and moved to Europe. Here's another one whose name you might recognize, someone who lost everything, but you might agree with me that he bounced back. His name's Albert Einstein. He was persecuted in Germany by the Nazis. They branded his groundbreaking theory of relativity as Jewish physics. He left in 1933, and he never returned to Germany. That's how he dealt with loss. Here's another person you might have heard of, Gloria Estefan. She says, I've always tried to put on a smile and a brave front, not just for my kids, but in my own life and all the difficulties that I've gone through. Her family fled Cuba. They fled Fidel Castro in 1959. They came to Miami as refugees. Says that she went on to sell 100 million albums and win 7 Grammys. So would you say she dealt with loss properly? She's not living in the past. The thing about the past is you can't change it. And you can't change the past. So you might as well move on into the future. I'm not familiar with this name, but you might know it. Luoldeng. He seems to be a basketball superstar with the Miami Heat. He says, I've been through a lot where I just look at it and say, it's another chapter. We've come out of much worse than this. A refugee from the Civil War in Sudan in 1985, a 2-time NBA All-Star, played for the Miami Heat and the Chicago Bulls. Madeleine Albright, the first female Secretary of State of the United States of America. She says, if you look at my life, generally, I've been put in situations which were difficult and which I conquered. Yeah, conquer over the situations. Don't let the situations conquer you. Don't get stuck. Learn the lesson, absorb the blow, and stay in the game. Don't get discouraged because 1 or 2 dodgeballs hit you and then stomp out of the gymnasium. Stay in the game. She was forced to leave the Nazis again in 1948. Sigmund Freud, a Jew from Germany, another Jew from Germany. What progress we are making. In the Middle Ages, they would have burned me. Now they are content with burning my books. This is a supermodel called Iman, who says, I could never forget how dehumanizing it feels to be helpless. She's a refugee. Her family was driven out of Somalia during a bloody coup in 1969. They crossed over into Kenya in the dead of night. They discovered, and years later, a photographer discovered her, setting on her a career as a supermodel in the United States. Going back to a previous era, Victor Hugo, famous Les Miserables. He was exiled from his beloved France, exiled to England. He said, I love everything that suffers for freedom, for the fatherland, and for justice, that I have peace of mind, even though it was always painful to tread on foreign soil. He was banned by Napoleon because he opposed Napoleon's authoritarian rule in the 19th century. And so it forced him to flee to France and most of his forced him to flee from France. Here's another person. There are 10 altogether. This is Thabo Mbeki, Thabo Mbeki. It is a firm assertion made by ourselves that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. His father was imprisoned with Nelson Mandela, and he spent decades in exile from South Africa, working for the struggle against apartheid. He stayed in Britain, he stayed in Zimbabwe, he stayed in USSR. He returned in 1990, and he succeeded Nelson Mandela as president in 1999. See how ignorant I am of current affairs and world history. So there are 10 people who did not drop out of the race. They did not opt out of the game. They stayed down on the field. They continued. They might have been injured. They might have been hurt, but they had the determination. They had the resolution. They had the guts. They had the grit. They had the grit to keep playing, to keep on going. But no one has more grittiness than devotees. You know, we're now on our, what is it, 81st segment, 81st 45-minute section, talking about Gajendra. When the chips were down, when he was in a life or death situation, there was attempted murder performed by Gajendra on the crocodile. At first, he was extremely fixed. He was extremely desirous of saving his life so that he could go back to his wives and his kingdom and enjoy the company of his grandchildren. But what happened in the process of his being attacked and struggling with the crocodile, which it is said the struggle went on for 1,000 years by the calculations of the demigod, his consciousness changed. If the crocodile is like a ball that hit him, a loss that came down the pike, hurtling and smashed into him, then what the effect of it was, what Krishna had intended in all of this, was to jolt him out of his complacency, out of his comfort zone. And in that process of stirring him up, what happened was the recollection of his previous life as a devotee emerged. And after that happened, and he began flipping through the Rolodex of his memory for 28 prayers that he had composed as a devotee king in his previous life. And as he's flipping through these, I think we're in the third one now, in the third chapter, the 8th canto, third verse, second chapter, third verse, third chapter. Now he's just like Ambarish. He doesn't care. He doesn't even want to be saved anymore. He's going to be saved. Krishna's going to save him. But he's not asking Krishna anymore to save him. He's asking Krishna to save his Krishna consciousness. He'd been separated by God's arrangement and by the curse of the sage. It had been many years since he'd remembered Krishna. And what he wants now is never, ever, ever to forget Krishna again. So when devotees are Number one, cheated, as the Pandavas were at the game of dice. Number two, when they're cursed, as Parikshit was, as Chitraketu was. Number three, when they're criticized, as Ambarish was. When they're ignored, as Dhruva Maharaj was. When they're on the verge of being killed, as Prahlad was and Gajendra was. They do not retaliate. They do not get overwhelmed in bitterness and resentment. They do not try to change the past. They recognize that the biting crocodiles of this world are God's tools to bring us out of illusion, to save us from total ignorance. And it's Krishna's way of waking us up, getting us out of our complacency, and reviving the Krishna consciousness, which is dormant within every person's heart. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhukadina Shravanada Sudhajati Karyodai. Love of Krishna is not something external, alien. Love of Krishna is innate. It's a dormant seed within the heart of all living beings. And devotees of the Lord across the boards join together in practicing themselves the revival of that dormant seed of love of God by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and having awakened that and put themselves on the path, they also canvas throughout the surface of the globe to encourage other people to take the medicine of the holy names, to be free from ignorance, illusion, resentment, bitterness, all the things that hold us back, so we can finish up our sojourn in this material world of birth, death, disease, and old age, and go back to home, back to God, where life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. So really, it's quite bizarre because I'm looking at this sidebar here on Facebook. It's completely blank. It doesn't show anybody listening. There are no comments whatsoever. I don't I don't know. Maybe I'll just try to go to Facebook here alive. Hold on a second. Let's see. Facebook. I just I'll open another tab and see if I can see what you all see. This is really weird. Technology is great, but sometimes it's just like all you can do is scratch your head, especially me. Okay, all right, I'm seeing. All right. Okay, let's see. I'm seeing the top comments. So let me see if I can. 12 comments. Natasha, embrace each parting, each ending that's found in life's constant flux where lessons abound. With Krishna's wisdom, see loss not as cost, but as steps on the journey not truly lost. Wow, you nailed the whole theme. You absolutely nailed it. Embrace each parting. Yeah, in each ending that's found in life's constant flux where lessons abound. With Krishna's wisdom, see loss not as cost, but as steps on the journey, not truly lost. That's very moving. That's very, very moving. Thank you for that. Brent, don't try to conform in anxiety. Krishna loves variety. Priya Krishna, probably for about the 7th or 8th day in a row from New York. Thank you very much, Priya Krishna Das. Brent, you're going to get hit by the balls of life. Don't sweat the strife. Someone may swipe your shirt off your back, but don't strike back. Don't let something impermanent keep you from your final determinate. You're going to get hit by the balls of life. Don't sweat the strife. Someone may swipe your shirt off your back, but don't strike back. Don't let something impermanent keep you from your final determinate. Okay, those are the 4 I can see. But it says there's 12 comments. But I don't know how to see the other comments. I can see that Brent's on board, Priya, Govinda Dave, Namamrita, Shukshma, Vaibhavi, and Natasha. and it says there are 12 comments. But when I click the comment section, not only do I not see the 12 comments, but the 4 other comments disappear. Anyway, they're out there. Even if I can't see them, you can see them. Let's go to Rob, shall we? See what he can add to all this creative output.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Haribo.
So don't complain of strife when hit with the balls of life. So that's pretty similar to Brent's.
Yeah, similar.
Don't be hurt when someone takes your shirt.
That's similar too.
Why all the fuss if the body is not us?
What's that again?
Why all the fuss if the body is not us?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something Vasudeva could have said to Kamsa.
Act according to your nature, not as a false creature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because Vasudeva is mollifying Kamsa. You know, he's saying you're not to blame. Of course, he is to blame. Everybody has to take responsibility for their own actions. But this is, you know, this is part of Vasudeva's diplomacy. He's kind of calming him. He's like, it's like a lion tamer. You know, he's trying to bring him down from his very extremely violent, uncontrollable mood.
Though not made in a mold, we are all accepted in the fold.
Yeah, nice. I like that. I like that.
We have a duty to self-defend so we can help a friend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't lament over loss that spiritual advancements cost.
That's, yeah, Natasha said something similar to that too.
When push comes to shove, learn to rise above.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, very good.
Don't stay down when hit, dust it off and show your grit.
Good.
Love of Krishna is not external, it is within and eternal.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Haribol.
Wow, thank you. Those were all gems. Those are all gems, as was Natasha and Brent's. And if anybody else contributed, I'm sorry I can't see you, but it will be visible there. This has been Wisdom Wednesday. We've had a good 3 sessions this week. I believe, at least I feel that way, and I hope you do too. And we'll have a hiatus, and we'll be back with you in a few days' time on Motivational Monday. In the meanwhile, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.